There are certain people you meet in this industry who change the temperature of a room, not because they're trying to, not because they're performing it, just because of something they carry with them, some quality that exists before they've said a word or done a thing. You feel it before you can explain it. And then later, when you try to explain it, you sound like an idiot. Scarlett Johansson changes the temperature of a room. I've known her for years, long enough that we've moved through different versions of ourselves, professionally and personally, and kept finding each other at the same parties, the same premieres, the same awards circuits, this strange recurring pattern where Hollywood keeps putting us in the same orbit. And every single time, without fail, there's this thing that happens, this electric, slightly uncomfortable, completely undeniable thing that I have spent a lot of energy pretending I don't notice. I notice the first time we were properly in the same space, not a brief introduction at some industry event, but genuinely in the same room for an extended period of time, was at an awards function. One of those long industry dinners where you're seated for 3 hours and the conversation at your table determines whether the night is memorable or something you survived. We ended up near each other by the kind of accident that Hollywood produces, the seating arrangement made by someone who either had no idea what they were doing or had an extremely precise idea of exactly what they were doing. I have never been able to determine which. She was already seated when I arrived. And I remember sitting down and she turned to look at me and said something, some greeting, something completely ordinary, and I had the strangest experience. I heard her voice before I processed the words. That's not something I can fully explain. It's just the order in which the information arrived. We talked through the entire dinner, every course, through speeches I should have been paying attention to, through moments where the people on my other side were clearly attempting to engage me in conversation, and I was giving responses that were technically words but had no real meaning behind them because every available piece of my attention was somewhere else. She's like that. She pulls focus, not aggressively, just completely. At some point, she said something genuinely funny, and I laughed. And then I said something in response that I intended to be clever. And she looked at me for a moment with this expression that was completely unreadable, completely composed. And then she smiled, not a big smile, a small one, a controlled one. And it was somehow more interesting than if she'd laughed. That's the thing about her, the restraint. Most people, when they're enjoying themselves, when something is landing, they show it fully. Scarlett shows you just enough to keep you reaching for the next thing. It's extraordinarily effective, and I'm quite sure she knows exactly how effective it is. We talked about acting that night, about what draws you to a role, about the difference between characters you choose and characters that choose you. She has very specific ideas about her work, very clear, very thought through ideas about what she owes a character and what she doesn't. I found myself disagreeing with her about something, I can't even remember what, and instead of backing off the way you do in polite social situations, she engaged, she pushed back, she had a position, and she defended it without raising her voice or changing her expression, just laying out her argument with this calm precision that was simultaneously impressive and slightly maddening. I love that. I cannot overstate how rare that is. In a world full of people who agree with you because agreeing with you is easier and safer, someone who disagrees with you thoughtfully is like water in a desert. We disagreed for probably 20 minutes about character motivation, about the relationship between preparation and instinct, about something Stanislavski said that I apparently misremembered and she corrected me on, which she did without making me feel stupid, which is a gift not everyone has. By the end of it, we had arrived at something like a shared position, not complete agreement, but a place where both perspectives had found common ground. And she raised her glass and said, "That was a good argument, the way you'd compliment a sparring partner." And I thought, yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was. There is a specific kind of tension that exists between two people who are genuinely attracted to each other and are both, for various reasons, not acting on it. It has a particular texture, a particular quality of aliveness. Every conversation has an undercurrent. Every silence has a meaning. You become very aware of small things, the distance between you, the length of a pause, the precise nature of a look. It's exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, and you are both completely aware that it's happening, and neither of you will name it. That is the energy that has characterized almost every interaction I've had with Scarlett Johansson. There was an event years after that first dinner, a film festival, one of the European ones, the ones where the glamour is slightly different, slightly more old world, slightly more about the history of the thing than the commerce of it. We were both there for different films, different parts of the program, but the festival world being what it is, the schedules overlap and the parties are the same and you keep encountering the same people. I saw her across a room at a reception and she saw me at the same moment, and there was this brief exchange, just eye contact across a crowded room that lasted maybe 2 seconds and contained more information than most conversations. She made her way over eventually, unhurried, stopping to talk to people along the way. And when she arrived, she said, "We have to stop meeting like this," which is an absurd thing to say because we hadn't arranged it. And we both knew that, and we both smiled at the absurdity of it. And then we stood there for a moment in this silence that was not uncomfortable at all. The comfortable silence is the real intimacy test, in my experience. Anyone can fill a silence. It's easy to fill a silence. The silence you let sit, the silence you're both willing to be in together without rushing to end it, that's something else entirely. We talked that night about cities, about the experience of being in a city that isn't yours, about the strange freedom of being somewhere nobody expects you to be anyone specific. She talked about Paris with this warmth that was different from the professional warmth she carries in public contexts. It was personal, and she chose to share it in that moment, which meant something. I said something at some point in that conversation, something I was trying to make interesting, and she tilted her head slightly to the left in this very particular way she has, and looked at me and said, "You're doing that thing where you're trying to be charming. Matter of fact, not unkind, just precise." And I said, "Is it working?" And she said, a little. I've been given standing ovations. I've received reviews that called my performances transcendent. I once had a director tell me I was the finest actor of my generation. And this woman, in this moment, told me I was a little charming, and it was somehow the best review I have ever received. The conversation about Venice at midnight, with the water just visible through the windows and the particular noise of that specific reception fading into background, all of it framed by this ongoing low-frequency tension, that's the one I go back to. Not any particular thing that was said, the whole texture of it. She left before I did that night. She had somewhere to be, or she'd decided the evening was over. And she said goodbye with this simple directness. She has no performance in it, just a clean ending. And then she was gone, and the room was a slightly different temperature. And I stood there for a moment, just adjusting. The thing about tension is that it requires two people. It's not a thing you do to someone. It's a thing that happens between people. And what I find remarkable about every interaction I've had with Scarlett is that it never feels one-directional. She's never passive in it. She's present, she's engaged, she's making choices in real time, and you feel those choices. You feel her deciding what to show and what to withhold, what to say and what to let hang in the air. It's a kind of conversation that happens underneath the actual conversation, and it demands your full attention. Most interactions don't demand your full attention. Most interactions you can do with some portion of your processing power while the rest is elsewhere. Not with her. Every available resource is engaged, and afterward, in the way of genuinely demanding things, you feel both tired and more alive than you did before. We've never made a film together, That's the thing I think about. All of this, all of these years of encounters and conversations and this ongoing electric something, and we've never actually worked together, never been in the room for the real thing. The daily extended proximity of a production, the way a long shoot strips away everything performed and leaves you with just the actual person. I don't know what that would be like. I suspect it would be extraordinary and entirely too much. There was a period where there was genuine talk about a project, something that would have put us in scenes together, proper scenes, the kind of scenes that require you to find the real thing between you because the camera sees through anything false. The project didn't happen, as so many projects don't, for reasons that had nothing to do with either of us. And when I heard it wasn't going forward, I had this complicated feeling that was approximately 40% disappointment and 60% relief. And I'm not entirely sure which proportion was about the creative opportunity and which was about the other thing. I've had conversations with directors about her, about what it's like to direct her. And what they consistently say in different words is that she gives you exactly what the scene needs and she decides what the scene needs herself. She comes with a read, a clear and specific read, and you can try to redirect it. And sometimes she'll take the redirection and sometimes she'll show you why her instinct was right. And either way, the scene ends up better than it would have been if she'd been passive. She's not a passive person in any context. I find that I have very little useful memory of specific things I've said in conversations with her. This is unusual for me. I have a reasonably good memory. I can tell you about conversations from 20 years ago, what was said, the exact words, the sequence of it. With Scarlett, I come away with an impression rather than a record. The impression is always vivid and clear and very specifically hers. But the content, the words, the quotable things, those go soft. I think it's because the whole attention is on the presence of the thing and not the material of it. That's a strange quality to have, to be so fully present that you absorb the words. The last time I saw her, before I started thinking seriously about this, we were at one of those industry things again. The industry things never stop. And we ended up in a conversation that started with the film business and moved through several other subjects the way good conversations do, and at some point landed on the question of regret. What you regret and what you don't. It was a surprisingly direct subject for the setting. The noise and the movement and the glasses of wine that were just there and kept being refilled. But she went there and I followed, and we talked about it with more honesty than I expected from either of us. She said something that I've thought about since. She said that she finds the things she avoided more interesting to her than the things she pursued and went after. That the shape of a life gets defined as much by what you didn't do as what you did. And she said it looking at me with that controlled expression and that small amount of information in her eyes. And I understood that it had layers, and I did not address the layers, and neither did she. And we moved on to another subject, and the evening ended the way those evenings always end. Clean, unresolved, exactly right in its incompleteness. There's a version of a story like this where something happens, where all of that accumulated tension finds a conclusion, where the narrative satisfies itself. Life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the tension is the thing. Sometimes the ongoing electric quality of two people in each other's orbit, never quite resolving, never quite ending, is its own complete thing. Not incomplete, complete in a different way. I don't know what to do with Scarlett Johansson except be grateful that someone like her exists and keeps crossing my path. She is, in the very specific and particular and genuinely meant sense of the word, remarkable. Remarkable in the way that means you remark on her afterward, you carry the remark, you're still making the remark years later in conversations about what it's like to be in certain rooms with certain people. The temperature in those rooms is different. It's always going to be different.